Toronto Maple Leafs have a golden opportunity as we have many new reports revealing some very interesting information surrounding the future of Mitch Marner in Toronto. We also have a new report that has come out surrounding Matthew Knies and contract negotiations between him and the front office. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. There's a ton to go over today, but before we get into it all, quick reminder, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, we're on the road to 15,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for your continued support and allowing us to hit 14. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. But Darius, a lot to go over today, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are coming off of horrible losses. We were all obviously live for both those losses, and it was a rough go. However, I'm still optimistic here, but we're going to take a step back and talk about some of the contract extensions today, because one kind of concurrent factor in all these losses is the play of Mitch Marner and how great he's been. And again, I haven't been a huge fan of Mitch Marner before the season started with all the antics with him and his agent, but you cannot argue the fact that he's probably been the best Leaf this season, and of course alongside a couple other guys. But contract negotiations have resumed between the Toronto Maple Leafs and Mitch Marner, and of course Matthew Knies. We're going to dive into that in this video. Let's start with Matthew Knies here. So the Maple Leafs have resumed contract negotiations with forward Matthew Knies. The team would prefer a longer term deal, but Knies camp is looking for a shorter term, possibly a 3 to 4 year bridge. It also wouldn't be surprising if these negotiations carry into the offseason, but talks have at least resumed in hopes of reaching an extension sooner than later. So Matthew Knies, phenomenal player. We know how good he has been. He's been one of the more impressive young players that the Leafs have had in a very long time. Really, he's finally figuring out how to use his body. We both predicted a breakout year for Matthew Knies. But Darius, what are your thoughts on these reports about an extension, about what kind of he could do going forward for this team? Because quite frankly, 16 points in 25 games, 10 goals, and let's keep in mind, 22 years old.
Yeah, he's not a point-in-game player, but I mean, I don't think anybody expected him to be coming into the season, but I think we were all expecting a career year from this player. And last year, he was on the top line. He didn't really get it done during the regular season, but again, he proved his worth in the playoffs. This is a guy who brings something to the table for the Leafs that they don't have much of, and now he's finally learning how to use his body very effectively in the NHL, at the NHL level, and he's the new age power forward. He's a fantastic player. So I'm thinking this is probably going to end up being a bridge. The Leafs obviously want to go long term, but I think it doesn't make any sense for Matthew Knies and his camp to go long term, especially where the salary cap is going. This is a player, because of what he brings to the table, can make a lot of money in his career. So I don't think they have any interest going long term, because again, the salary cap is going to go up a lot over the next couple of years. So obviously he wants his piece of the pie as well. He's not going to make as much as the top end guys. There's no way. He's never going to make even close to as much as Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, or anything like that. But he's going to be paid pretty well because he is a good player. And again, he's not a point-in-game player, but he gets it done. He goes into the corners. He goes to the front of the net. We've seen it time and time again this year, and he gets it done in the playoffs. He has that intimidation factor. He initiates, something that I've been saying that the Leafs need to do more of. So I love Matthew Knies. They're going to get it done. There's a contract will get signed. I think it's probably going to be after the season, and I think it's going to be more closer to a bridge deal with a lower AAV than obviously a higher one over long term. Although I think the Leafs would want that, but I just don't think Matthew Knies and his camp have any interest in that.
Yeah, and he's trying to maximize the amount of money that he's getting paid. 22 years old, like I already showed you guys, 16 points in 25 games. Not quite a point per game player, but all the other things he does on the ice obviously translates as well. His physicality, like you mentioned, pure power forward at this point, which is rare to see, especially at 22 years old. And keep in mind, he just turned 22 years old less than 2 months ago. So very intriguing to see what Matthew Knies is going to be doing as the the season continues to progress and as he continues to be one of the the shining stars for this team. But speaking of contract extensions and I guess shining stars this season, it's Mitch Marner, and he was asked about his contract. He said, "I haven't really thought about it, honestly. I'm a hockey player when I come to the rink, but other than that, I'm a human being. I've got a great family and friends around me to keep my mind distracted and keep things loose and fun," which is a very interesting way to. It's a respectable comment. And I think it's safe to say he's playing his best hockey of his career right now. And we'll dive into some other things here, but it seems like contract negotiations have renewed to a degree. We're hearing a bunch of reports and rumors basically highlighting that they're trying to get something done, the Leafs that is. But of course, from the Mitch Marner front, he's going to stay quiet regarding those conversations. But we're hearing a lot of rumors circulate that the Leafs are trying to get him extended. That being said, I think it's at, like we've heard the whole time, I think it's at the number that they want. Like we recovered it last week, around 13 million, and Mitch Marner's looking for 14 million. So he broke the silence on it, and nothing too crazy here, but he's playing such good hockey that I think he tests free agency.
I think that the Leafs and Mitch Marner should wait to sign this contract or get this done until after the playoffs. A lot of this is going to ride on how Mitch Marner performs in the playoffs and how the Leafs do in the playoffs. I know that there was contract talks, earlier this season, or I guess before the season started in the preseason, those kind of halted. And now, it was reported last week that the Leafs have kind of this invisible internal cap now around Austin Matthews' contract. Nobody can go higher than Austin Matthews. And honestly, I'm not sure anybody should on the Toronto Maple Leafs go higher than Austin Matthews. So they have this internal cap. Apparently he can get more on the open market. There's a couple guys that might get more. Rantanen is also a free agent this year, and there's rumors and reports of $13-14 million for these guys. And while that could be true because the cap continues to climb, the Leafs have kind of made it known that you can't go higher than X. You can't go higher than whatever it is that's lower than Matthews' contract, right? Whatever number that they've put in their internal cap. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. If he thinks that he can get more and he wants the money, maybe he does test free agency. But if he really wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, he's going to have to kind of play by the rules at this point, which is something that the Leafs haven't done the last couple of years, especially with contract negotiations. So we're going to see how it plays out. If he really wants to be in Toronto and says, that he loves to be a Maple Leaf as much as he does, and he doesn't want to go anywhere else, I think he's going to have to take what the Leafs offer him at this point, because again, it's going to be tough if they have this internal cap. And some of those reports might just be, Brad Shiliving, maybe Brandon Shanahan throwing that out there. So, they kind of get the idea early in the season, hey, you're not going to get $14 million here. Could be a little bit of that too, but it's going to be interesting. He is playing really, really well this year. He plays in every situation for this team. The penalty kill, he plays on the power play, 5-on-5. He's doing it all great this season. Dare I say, like Luke Gazdic said, some of the best of his career. He's playing a more mature game when he's not with Austin Matthews, I find. So when he's not playing on the same line as Austin Matthews, he plays a much more mature game so far this season. So that's something to look out for as well. But he's been playing fantastic this year. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I don't think a contract gets done, if it does get done with the Leafs, until after the playoffs.
I think there's a much higher chance a Matthew Knies contract gets done than a Mitch Marner one. And you see guys like Nazem Kadri come out and saying that Mitch Marner is the heart and soul of that team, which is an interesting comment. And I'm sure a lot of Leafs fans would argue that. You could argue that it's William Nylander, Austin Matthews, of course. And he spoke out to the Leafs Nation and said, just thank you. I think at some point people probably thought drafting me was a bit of a reach. With my size and all that, knowing, basically just talks about how he was an underdog and all these different things. Every year brings a new challenge, a new blessing, and fortunate for it all. He's very grateful and fortunate to be a Leaf. We knew that he wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. So hopefully in the offseason, a deal gets done. And depending how the playoffs go, he's playing good enough regular season hockey to where you can kind of justify paying him a lot of money. And that's kind of what it comes down to. Obviously, Matthew Knies, you see Mitch Marner here, 38 points in 27 games. He has been quietly one of the best players in the NHL, and he's scoring a little more. He's still facilitating great, and ultimately he's on track for a lot of goals, a solid amount of goals, and great just play all around. And one other thing to note is his work ethic and his defense has been a lot better than we've seen in years past. So I'm excited to see what happens with Mitch Marner. His two-way play is nice, and Craig Berube unlocked him a little bit, and if he continues to do this, I wouldn't mind seeing him locked up with the Toronto Maple Leafs for the future, because if this is what Craig Berube can do for Mitch Marner, and also Matthew Knies, I think if I was Mitch Marner, I'd probably want to stay in Toronto. And ultimately, I think he does. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think he wants to stay a Leaf. I think that Toronto's a good situation for him. I like Mitch Marner. I think he's a really great player. I think he's one of the best players in the league. And, I'm going to cheer for him as long as he's a Toronto Maple Leaf. I want the Toronto Maple Leafs to win. So as long as he's on the team, I'm going to cheer for him. But you know what? If you want to stay a Maple Leaf, it's got to be for the right dollar amount. It's not going to be, I don't think, more than Austin Matthews at this point. So if you really want to stay in Toronto and make it happen, it's going to be for a little bit less. If you want to make more money, you can go somewhere else, I guess, at this point. But we'll see what happens when the playoffs come around, because playoffs change, feelings change. So we're really going to see what happens in if they get past the first round, or how deep they go into the playoffs this year, because they're poised to do that. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are on that. A lot going on. Obviously, the Leafs play again on Tuesday, and reports are going to start to escalate soon surrounding trades. So make sure you stay tuned for all that. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know what your thoughts are. See you later.